Hey everyone, thanks for watching, welcome back. So in this video, I'm going to take you through a little bit comparing our two scholars for Christian feminism. So this is in the Christianity topic, Gender and Sexuality, and we've got Daphne Hampson and Rosemary Radford Ruether. Now these two are, I wouldn't say hugely straightforward, because there's quite a lot of disagreement on many things. They're quite far apart, despite both being feminists and looking at Christianity through a feminist lens. So they do have things in common, but there are some quite key differences as well. And I think a really important place to start is to establish that there's more than one way to be a Christian feminist or to look at Christianity through that feminist lens. So let's start there. Okay, so feminist theology, if you're revising this whole topic, you'll probably know a little bit about how feminist theology came about. It has a lot to do with biblical criticism. So the idea that once the Bible became available in lots of languages and lots of people had the ability to read, it started becoming much more of a thing to examine the Bible through different lenses, including a feminist one. So broadly speaking, feminist theology has come about in the last 100, 150 years or so. The basic argument is that Christianity has been shaped by and for men and is therefore inherently patriarchal. So there are very patriarchal structures baked into Christianity. And we can see lots of examples of that, from Jesus only appointing men as the disciples, to the ongoing debates over what leadership roles women can play in the church, to things like complementarianism in the Catholic Church, the idea that men and women are equal but separate. So there's quite a lot to go at here. And this is why we get different takes on feminist theology. So we've got the liberal strand. This is probably closest to what you might know as feminism or secular feminism. So it presents the patriarchal system as illogical, there's no good reason to say that one sex is better than another, and denying women the fundamental right to equality with men. So a lot of people who pushed over the years for women to be more included in church decision making and in church leadership, this is where they're coming from. They're saying it just makes no sense to cut out half the population simply because they're women rather than men. We've then got the biblical strand. This is looking at the nature of God, the nature of relationships in the Bible, and it concludes that God is loving and caring, and those are not really qualities that are very kind of alpha male. They're qualities associated with women. And the other thing that this points to is the importance of women within the life of Jesus. So Jesus had lots of female friends, lots of female supporters. Women were the first witnesses to the resurrection. None of that would be there, surely, if Jesus hadn't valued women and if Jesus hadn't been quite radical for his time. Speaking of radical, the radical strand of feminist theology, this is sort of where Daphne Hampson is at, because she's arguing that women should move beyond Christianity and that it's important to speak about God in a gender inclusive manner. So Hampson's whole argument is that Christianity is broken and can't be fixed. The sexism is baked in. It can't be mended, and therefore it's better to move on from it than to try and fix it. So that's why we're going to pick it up with Hampson's views. So this is Daphne Hampson. She is what we call a post-Christian theologian. Post-Christian because that means she has moved on from Christianity. There's two reasons for that. Firstly, she no longer buys into the idea that the Christ events, so all the events around the life of Jesus, are factually correct. She finds that very, very scientifically dubious and thinks that in the 21st century it's not credible to build a relationship on those things as if they're facts. So I think our argument here is that, we have so much scientific evidence now to show us that actually people don't come back from the dead, and that virgins can't give birth to children, and that people don't ascend physically into heaven. So she has a scientific problem. That leads us on to problem number 2. Not only is Christianity predicated on these events having really happened, if they did, it all took place in such a deeply sexist and patriarchal society that the baggage from that just became part of Christianity, and it became baked in. Now, those are my words rather than hers, but it's like you couldn't remove the sexism from Christianity if you wanted to. And for Hampson, that's a huge problem. So here's a little bit more on her views. She has this view that Christianity is irredeemably sexist, so it can't not be sexist. It shows women as the other, it shows women as secondary to men, and there are loads and loads of examples of that in the Bible and all throughout church history. It carries this patriarchal baggage that can't be completely removed. So even if today all churches suddenly started treating women completely equally, I think Hampson would argue that the damage is already done. You can't undo what's been done. Now she goes further, and this is what some people find perhaps a little bit spicy about her views. She actually uses the word fascist to describe Christianity. And, fascism is quite a loaded term, but she's using it in the sense that Christianity holds one group of people to be superior to another. And she finds that completely unacceptable. But she's not an atheist. She's no longer a Christian, but I wouldn't describe her as an atheist. She prefers to speak of that which is God than to use traditional male ways of speaking about God. So if you think about what you might have learned in the Christianity topic about God, anthropomorphic language, male language, it's all very geared towards this idea that God has these qualities of maleness. And Hampson thinks we need to move away from that because it's damaging and it's not accurate. Okay, so for a contrast, let's look at Rosemary Radford Ruether. Now, she died a few years ago. She was a little bit older than Daphne Hampson, but during her life, she was a Roman Catholic, but at the same time a feminist theologian. And some people struggle with the idea of Catholic feminism. It's definitely a thing. And Rosemary Radford Ruether was a Catholic feminist. She thinks Christianity can be understood through a feminist perspective. So you can absolutely look through that feminist lens and see loads of stuff that's really positive about women. So she uses some examples from the life of Jesus. Jesus sided with outcasts. He stood up for the oppressed within society, and this included women. So if you wanted an example, you could possibly talk about Mary Magdalene. You could look up the passages involving her a little bit. And Jesus was critical of people who were trying to use religion to control. Ruether sees Jesus as a liberator. So he came to set people free from whatever their oppression was. And we could use the example from Mark's Gospel. This might have come up for you in situation ethics as well. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. Jesus's point there was that the Sabbath, even though it's part of the Jewish law, it's a gift. It's a good thing. It's a thing to cherish. It's not a stick to beat people with. The point of the Sabbath isn't to go around checking that everybody is keeping the Sabbath. The point of the Sabbath is to rest and reflect and rebuild your relationship with God. It shouldn't be a law enforcement device. So a little bit more on Ruether. She believed that Jesus should be viewed androgynously rather than as male. Perhaps not gender neutralizing the Bible particularly, but through our modern understanding. So a way to think about this is, what if we look at Jesus as a person rather than as a man, and look at Jesus's qualities and think, well, what have we actually got here? So she argues that Jesus embodies traditionally male characteristics, but also female characteristics. He's authoritative and powerful, but he's also caring, healing, forgiving, kind to children, demonstrates a tremendous amount of love. Again, these are not hugely macho alpha male qualities. So she argues that it doesn't make sense to see him that way. Having this female nature is what makes Jesus different, having both natures. She then goes on to make points about the modern world. So she argues that because women are the ones who get pregnant and give birth, women have got this inherent connection to nature that's quite difficult for men. So because women have got this stake in bringing new life into the world, women might perhaps care a little bit more about what that world is like. So this helps to develop ecological inspired ethics. That is an ethical system that protects the planet. Ruether also argues, and you might agree with her, you might not, that male domination, very male dominated societies, contribute to exploiting the planet. So qualities such as, things that drive capitalism, making money, being providers, being producers. Actually, this isn't great for the planet, but because women are raising life, women have got that different perspective, and so women can develop what she calls ecofeminism. That might sound like a lot of disjointed views, but if we put it all together, I think what she's arguing is that there is hope for Christianity. I think she was trying to fix it from the inside, if that makes sense, and that having a feminist perspective can actually really help the Christians of the future, as well as perhaps not massively dwelling on the problems of the past. And she agrees there were problems. So, just to bring it to a conclusion, I've just got a little slide here on where they disagree and where they agree. So the areas of disagreement are quite clear. Hampson says that Christian claims about Jesus' birth, death, resurrection can't particularly be true. Ruether thinks there's no problem with them being true. Hampson rejects Christianity. She thinks people should move on from it. Ruether is more about reframing it through a feminist perspective. She thinks there is room for everybody there. Hampson argues Christianity is irredeemably sexist. Ruether isn't having that. She argues that if we particularly look at Jesus and the nature of Jesus, we can see that female nature, so what women tend to be like, is possibly more Christ-like than what men tend to be like. And through that, she sees a lot of hope. Now, where they agree is, firstly, that there are problems. Christianity has historically discriminated against women. That's very hard to deny if you look back at the history of Christianity. So that's a key area of agreement. Another one is that they both agree that the way forward is to find new ways of speaking about God that avoid these traditional problems of what gender is God, talking about God as if God is male, and anthropomorphizing God, so talking about God as if God is human. None of that is particularly helpful. So moving forward, we need to completely take gender out of it. That's their main area of agreement. Okay, that's it. I hope that's helped. Leave a comment if you'd like to, if that's been useful, and work hard, and I'll see you soon.